Hi everyone, it's Eliana and I have a card to share with you today. I am using my newly acquired Concord and 9 stamp set. I made this card the same day that I received my stamps in the mail. I'm going to be using the Lacy Leaf stamp set and the coordinating die. First, I'm going to start with some Alta New washi tape, and I'm just going to put that onto my card base. And I'm wanting the very first triangle to be a solid, and so I'm trying to carefully place the pattern onto my card base. And then I'm going to trim anything that overhangs. Now I'm going to use my MISTI to measure out my card front panel. I want to use some foam to lift up that panel to give it some dimension. And so I'm just figuring out what size to trim it down. And so I'm going to trim it down to 3 3/4. And before I get started, I'm going to stamp my lacy leaf onto some vellum. And my embossing buddy is in a box on its way back from a trip, so I've been using cornstarch with a paintbrush to prep my vellum to prevent any of the oils from my fingers or the static from the vellum, prevent the embossing powder sticking to areas I don't want. So I just use some cornstarch. Now I'm just stamping the image, the stamp, with some Versamark, and I am checking my vellum to make sure that I did get a good impression. Now I'm going to be using some Wow embossing powder. This is the metallic gold rich pale. Gold rich pale is what's on the jar, and I'm going to heat the powder up with my embossing gun. You want to make sure that the gun is nice and hot. You don't really want to have the gun on the vellum for that long because it will warp a lot. Now I'm taking the die and I'm just going to line it up and use some tape to hold it down while I run it through my die cutter. Now I'll be able to figure out where I want to add the other stamp to my project. But I also want to make sure that I give myself enough room for the sentiment, so I'm going to skip ahead and I'm going to cut the sentiment from some black cardstock. I'm using some adhesive paper to so that I don't have to put glue on the back of the very fine sentiment. And so I'm just going to cut out the sentiment that comes in the same kit. Once I have it cut out, I could check the placement to see exactly where everything is going to go. And I'm pretty happy with that. And so I just want to make sure that how it looks with the panel behind it. And everything moved on me, so I have to go back and check again to make sure that it's going to look okay. I'm going to stamp it again in Versamark. The Versamark is a sticky ink, and so it stays wet for a while, and the embossing powder will stick to it. And there's something on my stamp, and I'm not aware of it yet. It's a little piece of clear acetate, a tiny piece, so I'm not really, I don't notice it until after I add my embossing powder, and I try to fix it later on, and you'll see that since I left my stamp on the MISTI, that it was an easy repair. So you can see that little spot right there that I'm trying to add more embossing powder. It's just not sticking to it. That's because the little whatever was on my stamp was preventing it from getting the embossing, the sticky ink on it. So I'll go back and I'll just go ahead and add some more Versamark to that section, and then add more powder to it. You'll see in just a second. And so I found the little piece of plastic that was on there, and I'm just adding ink to that one little spot just so that I don't have to mess with embossing the whole thing again. You could have also used a Versamark marker, but the stamp was already on the lid of the MISTI, so I just went back to using that. So now that everything is done, I want to add some black paint to the front of the card. So I'm just using some Mr. Huey's black spray. I've had this for a while and I rarely pull it out. And I want it to go in the diagonal line that the stamp is already going. And I'm just going to wait for it to dry a little bit. Now I did get impatient and the paint wasn't drying on the embossed area, so I went and wiped it and just created a big smear. But since I'm going to be putting my leaf on top of it, it's really not a big of a deal. And now I'm adding my card panel to the front, and I'm just going to pull away one strip, because if I totally mess this up, it's a lot easier to pull off the card panel with one strip of adhesive than the whole panel full of adhesive. And I don't really want to press down on the card panel with my hand, because I'm not sure if everything is completely dry, so I'm just using my mouse pad to press everything down. And once I am sure that it's where I want it to be, I'm going to remove the remainder pieces of the foam tape backing. And I'm going to use my mouse pad again to press everything down. And now I can add my sentiment. Well, first I'm going to add my leaf. I'm using some vellum adhesive. From what I understand, this has been discontinued, but I purchased a small bag at a local scrapbooking store garage sale. And there were about 5 refills for this, and so I think I'm pretty much set for life on the vellum adhesive. I'm just going to turn up the edges to my leaf a little bit, just so that it creates a little bit of dimension. And now I've removed the backing to the sentiment, and the glue on the back of the cardstock is super sticky, and so it keeps sticking to my hands. And luckily it was very easy to shape the word back together. And so I'm just lightly placing it, and I'm not pushing anything down until I get the wording exactly how I want it on the front of the card. Just because it's so frail, for lack of a better word, I'm just trying to shape it back. And I'm looking at the die cut, the negative die cut, to make sure that I'm about right. And once I get it positioned, I can press it down. I did try doing this with some clear foam to pop the wording up, but it took too much time, and so I just decided to adhere it straight down. And I'm just using some generic gold sequins. I believe they're from Joann Fabrics, just some sequins that I purchased there many years ago. And I'm just placing them, and I'm basically looking for spots where there's already a little bit of the splatter pattern, and so I'm just adding a few to that area. I always worry about adding too many sequins, and so I think I only add 3, just so that I have the odd number. There's already a lot of splatter going on with the card, so I didn't really want to add too much to it. I want the focus to be on the leaf and the grateful and not on the bling that's all around it. So I just kind of added the 3 and a little bit of a triangle so that your eye goes straight to the leaf and the sentiment. And that's about all. This would be an easy one to mass produce, just so that you have some thank you cards. And I appreciate you spending some time with me, and thanks so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed, be sure to hit the subscribe button as well as the like. And I hope you have a great day. Bye.